Okay, so we're going to start with the second problem that we're going to work on. The second problem is f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 8. So we need to define our a, b, and c based on our quadratic function that's over here. So a is 1, b is 6, and c is 8. Now, we need to find our axis of symmetry, so we're going to use this formula. So we have x is equal to -6, because that's our b, over 2 times 1. So then we're going to simplify it, and it becomes -6 over 2, which becomes -3. So I have x is equal to -3, and that is our axis of symmetry. So we're going to put our axis of symmetry on our coordinate plane. So we need to make sure that we draw our x and y axis. Let me use a different color for that. X-axis, or y-axis, x-axis. And so I know that my axis of symmetry is at -3. So -3 is here. Highlight -3. All right. So back to the top, we need to find our vertex. So we need to substitute our x, which is 3, and we're going to substitute -3 into our function. So it's going to be -3 to the second power plus 6 times -3 plus 8. Now, you guys should have your graphing calculators, and you should be able to put this whole thing in your calculator. But if you don't have your calculator, you can just go ahead and simplify it by hand. So it becomes 9 minus 18 plus 8. And then it simplifies, and you're going to end up with -1. So we have f of -3 equals -1. So we're going to write it as an ordered pair, -3, comma, -1. All right, so we're going to put our vertex on our coordinate plane. So we have -3, -1. So I'm going over 3, down 1, making my point. That's my vertex. Then we're going to use our 1A, 3A, 5A rule. So we go over 1 and up 1. Then we go over 1 and up. Starting from here, we go over 1 and up 3. 1, 2, 3. And then if I tried to go over 1 and up 5, it would be off the graph, so we don't need to do that part. And then we just reflect on the other side of the axis of symmetry, connect it, and we have our parabola. So to make our table, we can make our table based on our points that we have here. So that means that my vertex is -3, -1. So we're going to put our vertex in the middle, -3, -1, because our vertex goes in the middle of our graph. So we're going to count backwards, -4 and -5, and we're going to count forward, -2, -1. And all you got to do is really look at the points. So for here, this is -2, and then we went up 0, so it's 0. This one is -1, and we go up 1, 2, 3, so that's here. And then you just reflect the points on the other side. Up here in our vertex form, we need to write it in vertex form. So I have f of x is equal to, and it ends up being actually for a. So in this case, our a is 1. So we can just put 1 right here, and then x minus h. So our -3 is h, our -1 is k. So since it's minus -3, whenever we have two negatives like that, we can just make it a positive. So we can change it, and it'll be -1 plus 3 squared, and then minus k, minus 1, because that's my k. Then we have the last thing, well, almost last thing, is our factor form. Our factor form we have to get when we find our roots. So in order to find our zeros and our roots, which is the same thing as the x-intercepts, we need to see where our graph crosses the x-axis. So it crosses the x-axis in this spot. So this is -1, -2. So if we count over, that's -2. And then also if we count over, so this is -3, and then we have -4. So those are both our roots and zeros or x-intercepts. They all mean the same thing. So we have f of x. Our a was 1, so you can put 1 there or you don't have to. And then the same thing applies. If I'm going to have x minus -2, I can just change that minus -2 and make it a plus. And then I can have the x, and then it would be minus -4, so to be +4. That's our factor form. And then we have our domain, which we said is all real numbers. And then lastly, we have our range. So our range is our y. So we're looking at where our range is, which is here, starting at our vertex, and it's going up. So it starts at -1 because that's -1 on the y-axis. So it's greater than or equal to -1. Okay, so that's this problem. And go to the next video so that you can do the third problem.